Welcome to the Brainz Magazine podcast, a podcast with in-depth interviews and conversations with world-class entrepreneurs, expert coaches, industry leaders, and international celebrities. Get exclusive insight into the world of business, mindset, leadership, and lifestyle with your host, Mark Sefton.
I want to welcome you to the next episode of the Brainz Magazine podcast. And today we have Ben Askins, psychedelic science war storyteller. How are you, Ben?
I'm doing wonderful. It's a pleasure to see you, Mark.
You too. Now, I've got to ask, without coming across as dumb here, but what is a psychedelic science war storyteller?
That's an excellent question to start off with, because so far I'm the only one that I've met. I imagine there are others out there, but I would be the only psychedelic science war storyteller. And it might take a little storytelling to try to articulate what I mean by that. But if you'll bear with me, I'll give it a shot. Is that okay?
Absolutely. I think it's so important, when we come across like characters and personalities and people that are creating, if there isn't already a front runner, then I think it's on you to kind of say this is what it is. Who else out there is a psychedelic science war storyteller? You're the first of its kind.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So here's how I'll try to explain it, bottom line, upfront style. My name's Ben Askins, but all my favorite people call me Doc, which is confusing because I'm not a doctor and I don't have a terminal degree. I spent 10 years as a combat medic, including a deployment to Iraq. And that was when I earned the nickname Doc, which is what everybody calls the medics that they love. So I, finished 10 years enlisted as a staff sergeant and a combat medic, used my GI Bill to get a Master of Divinity degree. But to be honest, I was always a much better soldier than I was a preacher. So I was pretty excited when Uncle Sam decided to send me to the Interservice Physician Assistant program so that I could go through and earn the opportunity to have a medical license. So I do have a medical license, but as a physician assistant, not a physician. So I'm still not a doctor, but everybody calls me Doc. I got all the way done with the physician assistant program in the military in 2020. And about 10 minutes later, there was a global pandemic and the planet shut down. And I went straight into a civilian job working in psychiatry, in mental health, and had the opportunity to provide hundreds of hours of ketamine-assisted psychotherapy to some of the most severely depressed and acutely suicidal people in the area where I was working. So at a time when a hospitalization could have meant a death sentence, I was given the opportunity to give a small number of people some hope and help see them through the pandemic. So we got to the other side of the pandemic, and I got called up again to deploy to Europe last year with an infantry battalion as their battalion medical officer. And so I went over to Kosovo and served there for about 6 months out of last year, working with combat medics and infantry soldiers on the K4 mission over there. And after returning home about 3 months later, I went and received certificate training from the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies in what's called MDMA-assisted therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder, which is another confusing, unique sort of thing because MDMA isn't legal in the United States at this point. It's a Schedule 1 medication, but they're looking at potentially rescheduling it next year so that this particular therapy can be implemented. So I have a certificate in a barely illegal form of therapy that involves psychedelics, and that involved a great deal of psychedelic science. So I have experience providing ketamine-assisted therapy, and I have training to provide MDMA-assisted therapy. And then I have a lot of friends in networking in that area. So I do this psychedelic science piece where I'm a clinician and I understand how to provide those therapies. And then I just love to hear and to share stories. And I think of war stories as, there's the literal war stories of my time as a veteran, in Iraq and in Europe. But it's also this metaphorical category, right, where everybody talks about their best stories as being their war stories from whatever it might be, the corporate world, the athletic world, the business world, hobbies, whatever. Your best, golf story could be a war story. So the niche that I enjoy kind of being in now is this brand that I'm launching called the Anti-Hero's Journey, where I've written a book of psychedelic science war stories, and I'm launching a podcast where I just like to hear other people's war stories, particularly in just the places that I'm interested. So that would be the long and the short of what I'm calling a psychedelic science war storyteller.
Well, I'm glad I asked, because there was a lot more under the bonnet than what I gleaned. Some of what I gleaned was definitely there, but there was a lot to it. But there was a lot in there that kind of like resonated. One was just the fact, if we just think of your name that you've been dubbed Doc, it's really interesting. I think it's Robin Sharma. He's got a book, Lead Without a Title. I think it's him. And I would much rather be called Doc for all the reasons you said, because of the fact that people identify with you, than to have it because, you've studied your ass off, but you're unrelatable and you're not able to have that human connection, right? So, I mean, that must feel pretty good to be called Doc, because I think that really kind of shines a light as to what your purpose is.
Yeah, I question the labels and the names and the titles that we all carry are all still somewhat superficial. Like, it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. There's a degree to which even, like, I'll mention early on in my book that I even consider my own name to be sort of a pseudonym to begin with, right? Because you just can't capture the essence of what a person is with just a degree title or a name or a job or even a resume, as impressive as some of them might be. Your birth certificate, as soon as they put that name on there, it's really just a pseudonym compared with who you even are at that early stage of development. So putting a label like Doc on it's a fun one to me. I feel like I earned it the hard way to some degree. When people scream for Doc, it's usually in an extreme situation, and I've had the opportunity to respond to those calls for help along the way. And I think it's one of my favorite nicknames, but there's plenty of other things that, people could call me that I would answer to. That's not a problem. If you just make eye contact and you make a noise with that hole under your nose, I'll listen. I'll pay attention. It's all just word games to me at this point.
I think it is a wonderful kind of story, as well as it being very rewarding, for you to be able to have that name. And the fact that, if people keep calling you, it's clear because you're dependable, reliable, which obviously is the heartbeat of anything that has its weight in gold. It needs to be consistent. It reminds me that, our gifting makes room for us, because I am going to ask you about the fact that, you've had such a varied career, and you've got a degree in outdoor education, as well as you said, being a psychiatric assistant. It's like you've got such a varied, but it seems like you have taken opportunities and you've stepped into them, whether it's serving in Kosovo, and obviously when COVID happened, it knocked us all around. But it's interesting how even then it still created an opportunity for you.
Yeah, I think I've been fortunate to have had many opportunities brought to me that many other people never have the privilege to get. And then when I've gotten some of those opportunities, I've made the most of many of them. I've certainly fouled up plenty of them along the way as well, but I've always been sort of a lean forward, let's keep going, let's not stop sort of a person for as long as I can remember. Heidegger has this concept of being thrown, of thrownness. He calls it Das Sein in his philosophy. And I always just kind of felt like I was a scuffed up fastball that got thrown into the planet. And I've just been kind of riding the ride ever since, just white knuckling through this thing. Yeah.
I mean, you talked about storytelling as well. I loved how you framed the fact that when you elaborated on the war stories, I found that was definitely more under under the bonnet there, because obviously for me, I was taking it very much more literally, but actually you were really relating it to everybody's like environment of where we've had struggle, we've had opposition, we've had loss, and drawing that out, I think is a beautiful thing to do. It reminded me a little bit of the film Hacksaw Ridge, where that guy's a medic. Is that a film that you've come across and kind of seen yourself in?
Oh yeah, Desmond Doss, the
Yeah.
Congressional Medal of Honor winner. Yeah, it's an amazing movie. I actually just finished reading his biography. I got it out of the library and just read it, so it's interesting that you mentioned that. It's there's this contrast, right? I wrote a book and I have a brand that I call Anti-Hero's Journey, which is something to try to unpack. You know, Desmond Doss is a hero. He was a conscientious objector in a time when that was a very controversial way of being. He was a Seventh-day Adventist, and he said, I won't carry a rifle, I won't kill anyone, but I'll be a medic and I'll support all of the guys. I'm patriotic. I love my country. I'll support all the people who are going into harm's way. And he was persecuted pretty significantly in the military as a part of that. Just the culture and the ethos of the time was, we're going to war. A lot of people are going to die and you're not willing to fight. So there's something wrong with you. And he stuck by his guns, and he absolutely refused to do anything that would offend his conscience. And then, you know, when the brown stuff hit the twirly thing and they got downrange and there was a whole lot of danger, it turned out that the kind of person that had the steel in their backbone necessary to say, I absolutely won't do anything that would hurt my conscience, is also the kind of person who will over and over and over again relentlessly put their life on the line if they're in that medical role. So I look at Desmond Doss as a hero to some degree, but I also question the concept of heroes in the first place, which is why I'm putting this thing out here as the anti-hero's journey, because, you know, you mentioned some of the accomplishments that I've had and that I seem like a good person, but I don't think some of those dualistic categories are as helpful for us in this particular period of development as people as they maybe used to have been. You know, like the idea of heroes versus villains is kind of oversimplified. Like, depending on the day of the week that you look at me and what I've been doing, I might look like a hero to you, or I might look like a villain to you. It just kind of depends on the day that, you know, you catch me, right? So life's a bit more complex and complicated than how we've been taught to perceive it in terms of heroes and villains and victims and bystanders, and all of those things are oversimplifications. And my perspective on a lot of that at this point is that we're all anti-heroes, which is a lot more complex way of being in the world, that we're both and we're neither at the same time.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you about your book, Anti-Hero's Journey, in a moment. It made me laugh, though. I don't know whether it was just your dry sense of humor, because you kind of went right over that, but it tickled me when you said that he stuck to his guns, right? Because that's actually really quite funny, isn't it?
Right, exactly.
He wouldn't pick up a gun.
Yeah, picking up on the ironies in life and the way that we tell the stories is just like, it's the most delicious thing in the world. Like, if you can catch just a little turn of phrase where somebody has like this superficial contradiction in the language that they're using, there's like a resonance at a deeper level of, hey, there's more going on here than what we're initially paying attention to. There's this in the theological traditions, they'll call it the noetic effect of sin. It's the way that we deceive ourselves about reality. The way that we perceive things has these ironies just embedded in them. And it's so fun. I call it the poetic effect of sin, is paying attention to those ironies, because those are hot spots. Those are places where you are putting out into the world that's something that may be contradicting the heart of what you mean to say, right? So Desmond Doss stuck to his guns and refused to pick up a gun, right? And that tells you a great deal about his story in a nutshell. It condenses down the truth of his story in a way that's fun to hear about, but it's a real serious story, right? It's life and death all the way through. And that's the way I think we have to kind of integrate everything everywhere all at once, if we can, is through some of those ways of recognizing what's serious and what's not, and taking things as seriously as we need to, but also being able to maintain humor and to laugh through some of the most serious things is the way that we survive them.
Yeah, it was very funny. So your book came out in May. It's called The Anti-Hero Journey. What would you say is the premise, and fundamentally, why did you write it? I mean, you've talked about how anti-hero is both and nothing in terms of being a hero, but what is the main premise, and what can people expect, to pick up from it?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. It's a genuinely loaded question that I've tried to think of a good answer for. And to be honest, I lived the book and I wrote the book, but I still don't fully understand the book myself. So if you want to take a look at it, Mark, or some of the other people out there want to listen to it and give me some feedback on it and help me understand what the hell's going on with this book, I'd appreciate it. The way that I try to explain it to people is that it's a bit of armchair philosophy and then just some of my own psychedelic science war stories. But there's a lot more going on with it than that. If I could tell you the backstory a little bit, I'm 42 years old, and that's a lot of fun to me because of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy saying, that 42 is the meaning of existence and nobody understands why. But at least for 1 year of my life, I lived long enough that I get to say I am 42, whatever that means. But about 2 weeks after my 42nd birthday, I just couldn't sleep. For 2 weeks straight, every night, I'd go to bed and I'd have these ideas. And it was mostly about my own life story and then just some of the, my own philosophy that I've cobbled together over the years. But I couldn't sleep until I put the ideas out of my head and down onto paper. I'd go downstairs. I'd sit in the chair I'm sitting in right now for this interview. I'd pound out these ideas into a document, and then I'd get tired and I'd go to sleep. And for 2 weeks straight, every night I'd have these ideas and I'd need to just kind of word vomit, and then I could sleep. And at the end of the 2 weeks, I had this rough draft of a book completed. The Anti-Hero's Journey is that The Zero with 1,000 Faces is that book. And you know how you can be kind of your own biggest critic, where like you write something and you read it and you're like, this is absolute trash. I don't even know why I'm alive. And then you can look at it and be like, you're so biased in favor of, this is the most amazing thing that I've ever done. Everyone needs to read this. It's so great. And I didn't have either of those feelings. I just kind of felt like this might be good enough. This might be a good enough piece of work to put out into the world. And then I shared that with sort of an inner circle of friends that I trust. They're the kind of people that won't just point out to you when you've made a mistake, but will make a joke out of it, right? Like, hey, it's not just, hey man, your fly's down, you got to fix that. It's, hey everybody, Ben's fly's down, like that's the group of people that I could trust to let me know if this was absolute garbage. And they were saying, yeah, I think this is pretty decent. This is good. We like this, So I just looked into publishing it. I edited it in March. I worked with some people to make some cover art and figure out how you publish things in April, and just launched it out into the world in May. So at one level, it only took me 2 weeks of insomnia to write this book. And at another level, it feels like it took 42 years to put it out there, because it is just a condensed version of everything that I think and feel and have experienced, trying to put it out there that way. To answer the other part of the question around the hero's journey versus the anti-hero's journey is some of the premise. You asked about the premise there. And, Joseph Campbell is this famous polymath from the 20th century who was just an expert on world cultures and mythologies, and a scholar of comparative literature that wrote The Hero with 1,000 Faces, this 500-page book looking at this pattern of storytelling that goes on in the world at this point, where you can see 4 basic stages to the hero's journey: the call, the separation, the initiation, and the return. And it's in every good children's story out there. Star Wars and the Lord of the Rings and all the Marvel Universe character story narrative arcs kind of match this cycle, and it's brilliant, but I don't think it matches actual reality. So that's why I'm putting out there the anti-hero's journey as this contrast to it. Campbell real succinctly summarized the pattern of hero as a hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are encountered and a decisive victory is won. The hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man. Alternatively, I'm proposing to the hero's journey, the mono myth, the hero with 1,000 faces, I'm proposing that we adopt the anti-hero's journey, the zero myth, the zero with 1,000 faces, that could be summarized as a zero ventures further than a hero, beyond the illusions of supernatural wonder, beyond fabulous forces, beyond decisive victory, never returning from a mysterious adventure, unknowing everything untrue. There are no powers, no boons, no fellow man. The zero has nothing, gives nothing, takes nothing, is nothing. The hero is all illusion, all reality is zero.
Interesting. Like it. You're getting people to think.
I'm
couple
getting
of
them
things.
to feel too, so it would appear.
That's good. That is good. Because thoughts always produce feelings. Couple of things that I wanted to just reflect back on, like when I asked you, like, and you very humbly and intriguingly said that you didn't really understand like your book too, which I thought in some ways quite clever as well as humorous, but also very humbling. Obviously it's called the anti-hero's journey. It's not called the anti-hero's destination. So I think some of the understanding is obviously of the fact that, you know, we're all on a journey. And so what we believe is true now, in a year when we have new revelation, new knowledge, then actually we may change or evolve our thought behind, you know, the truth. So there was that. And there's also that sense of sometimes our knowing isn't intellectual. So I think it's really interesting, isn't it, how often we may not understand fully what we've just shared or said, but it comes innately or intuitively, but it's because it bypasses the brain and it actually is interacting from a different level, right?
Yeah, to some degree at this point, we've been trained, especially in the Western world, to divide everything up, divide things into thoughts and feelings, cognition and emotion, just parsing out things down to the molecular level. Like, can we get to the essence of the essence of the essence of what's going on here by just pulling things apart like a little kid over and over and over again? And I think there has to be this dynamic balance between pulling things apart and putting things back together. Disintegrating and integrating is the way that a lot of knowledge is gained or is gleaned. It's really easy to kind of fall off the horse on one side or the other and just get very focused on pulling things apart, or get very focused on trying to see the big picture and putting all the things together. So I think you're on the right track in that regard, and we're kind of vibing a little bit, right? You're saying I said some words and that goes into your ears, but it's not as simple as just I said some words and they go into your ears. There's a lot more going on there. There's it's vibrational, right? Your whole body's involved in this. My whole body's involved in this. We could parse it down all the way to like what neurons are involved in the auditory cortex in the process of making these sounds into thoughts inside of your head, and all of the medical magical mystery that's going on with some of that stuff. We could parse it all the way down to there. And then we could also recognize that the larger context involves you being in the United Kingdom, me being in the United States, us connecting through some weird thing called the internet to have this conversation in the first place, so that this conversation is actually going to outer space first and then coming all the way back down, and it's all happening in real time. And Mark, we just live in a simulation, man. Like, the whole thing's just, it's a sham. It's not that reality isn't real or doesn't exist. It's that nothing in reality is what it appears to be, is kind of what I drive at with some of this stuff.
I love that. I think you have a bit of fun, don't you? Kind of playing with people, but in a good way, not in a a dangerous or unethical way. There's some enjoyment there.
But I hear just a little bit of fear there. Like you're a little bit worried. You're a little bit scared. Like, he's having fun with it, and that's okay. But this could go dark real fast, couldn't it? Okay. Yeah. The way that I try to summarize and condense some of this stuff down is that my life mission is to embody all of life's paradoxes in a way that overcomes fear with love. But you got to acknowledge that we have fear circuits in our brain, like it's hardwired in there, and they have a purpose and they have a role to play. They keep us alive in really crazy situations, like the freeze, fight, flight, sympathetic nervous system response to a combat situation. You need that in order to survive, but it's also something that is easily short-circuited, and you don't need to live out of fear circuitry all of the time. And the way that I've found for myself to integrate the fear circuitry in a way that's not, running haywire, so that I'm constantly suspicious and looking at everybody's hands and making sure everybody in the room isn't carrying a weapon or whatever, is to pay the same level of attention to everyone that I might in like a personal security detail situation where I'm trying to protect, a valuable principle, like was some of our mission in Iraq. I'm paying the same level of attention to everyone around me, but with a loving orientation rather than a fearful orientation. And I've found that to be a way of being in the world that's really enjoyable and really satisfying. And it gives me the opportunity to have a lot of fun, but also to help a lot of people. Most of us are kind of turned inward at this point. We're very focused on our own hero's journey. We're all trying to figure out, like, I'm on this journey and what's next on the list of my to-do list, and oh man, like there's that guy over there and he looks hungry and beat up and dirty on the side of the road, like the parable of the Good Samaritan or something. And everybody keeps cruising on by because they're on their own hero's journey, and everybody has a good reason for being who they are and for being distracted and for being who they are. But if you pick your head up and you're able to pay attention a little bit more to the network and to the environment that you're in, you can do an awful lot of good if you just kind of let go of that hero's journey story and come on over here and join me on the dark side, on the anti-hero's journey, which actually winds up looking a little dark from a hero's perspective sometimes, but it's a whole lot of light and it's a whole lot of fun once you get here.
Yeah, I can understand what you're getting at. I mean, like I said, I know that there's the serious element to it, but I mean, you've certainly got me smiling, Ben, and the book sounds really interesting and sounds like very different, because I mean, there's so many books out there. So we kind of like the idea of, tapping into something different. And obviously everybody loves like Marvel and loves the hero stuff. Having the other side of the coin, I think it then becomes more relatable. But I think it's good to kind of like have, as you said, the paradox and the contrast, because I mean, I love contrast anyway, in terms of what one thing looks from one side and how it looks from the other. And I mean, fundamentally, like what you were just saying there about, you're just really encouraging people to kind of put their head up and not just be self-absorbed and self obsessed in some ways. And obviously that all comes down to, mental health. And we talk a lot about our own mental health, which we all have a responsibility for. But what would be, as we bring this into land, what would be like maybe one thing that we could do to help the mental health of others? Is maybe one thing that we need to be doing and one thing that we need to stop doing to cause such challenge for others?
Yeah, one thing to stop, I'm going to do two sides of the same coin. One thing to stop doing would be to stop taking so seriously everything that you're taking so seriously. And I'm talking about life and death stuff here, politics and family and cancer diagnoses and war. It's all very serious, but you're taking it too seriously, whatever it is. The other side of that coin is being able to laugh about the things that you're taking so seriously is the way that you'll be able to carry those things and have a greater effect on the things that you're taking seriously than you would if you were angry about it or sad about it. And it's okay to feel all of the emotions that you feel all the way through to the other side of those emotions. The way that I'll describe it is you need to laugh until you cry, or you need to cry until you laugh. Don't get caught in a place where you're only crying or you're only laughing, because if you get stuck there, you're missing out on the entire range of human experience. So I think that, humor is a way that can carry us through some of the darkest periods of our lives, and allows us to sort of buckle up and roll the rock all the way up the hill so that we can accomplish the things that we need to accomplish there.
Yeah, there's two things that really have stood out today in this conversation with you, Ben, which has been really enlightening. The one is the fact I really feel like you're giving people permission. That really comes across. Like there is no like necessarily right or wrong or the right way to go about things, and there's just a real freedom in you just allowing whatever it is to be. So I really love that. And then, something in psychology, which you obviously would be very attuned to, is this whole thought process of what if. So sometimes we very much kind of are limiting ourselves, but then when we throw in the question of what if I'm taking this the wrong way, or what if it isn't the way I fear it may.
Yeah, it's I think we can agree that most of our experience is either memory or imagination, or some combination of the two. And what I want to try to help people to do is engage their imaginations in ways that opens up new possibilities to them for understanding their own memories, so that they're integrating their own stories in a new way. And then they can carry that story forward and write the story and not just read it, and do that in a way that promotes flourishing in people. And I do think that that is best summarized in, pop culture sorts of ways, in this like anti-heroes concept that integrates the fact that we're all both good and bad, and somehow also more than just good or bad at the same time. I'm a big fan. I like to joke around on my website that I'm a Deadpool wannabe, because I think he's like the ultimate anti-hero out there, right? Everybody's so exhausted with superhero movies at this point, but then there's this guy who's like the merc with a mouth, this assassin that still somehow cares about, children in the storylines and takes care of people, but it's all confusing and complicated and complex, and it's not that simple. So I've come up with this like little character for my brand that I call Medpool, who's this medic with a mouth, like maybe I'm telling some stories about myself too much here at this point or whatever, but like, I think it'd be pretty fun to have this alternate universe where there's this anti-hero version of Deadpool. They have evil Deadpool in the comics, right? But they don't have like a quote unquote good Deadpool. And that's what I would throw out there as a suggestion to all the Marvel fanatics out there, is we need more anti-heroes. We need more complex stories and not simplistic good, bad, evil versus good, woo woo. We need people who are embodying all of that evil and all of that good. And those are the sorts of stories that I think will carry us as a species to the next level of development, where maybe we can get off of each other's necks and be kind to each other, give each other room to breathe, and actually allow each other to imagine a world where we can all be whole and we can all be healthy.
Amazing. So Ben, how do people find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, the easiest way is just to go to my website, antiheroesjourney.com. But I'm on all of the social media platforms you could possibly imagine, just doing my silly song and dance. I love memes, and I'm just throwing memes out there. And I love nerdy science stuff, so I throw journal articles out there too. And I'm on, TikTok and YouTube and Facebook and Threads and Twitter now. I guess it's called X, whatever that means. And Instagram. And so you can find me all over the place, LinkedIn. whatever, all the social media platforms. I'm just having some fun out there. But if you want to get a copy of my book, you can go to antiheroesjourney.com and download the digital copy. It should be next week that we'll have the Spanish translation available on the website as well. The audiobook just dropped yesterday on the website. You can download that there too. And then if you want a paperback copy to use to like prop up a wobbly table leg or chair or something like that, you can get that on Amazon.com. But the link there is on my website as well.
Amazing, Ben. That sounds fantastic. I appreciate so much this conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Mark.
Cheers. Thank you for joining this episode with me, Mark Sefton. I hope you've really enjoyed it. Feel free to leave us a positive review on iTunes, and I look forward to welcoming you back to the next episode of the Brainz Magazine podcast.